Yep. There's so many things that are a part of the tantrum. Yeah. You think about everything a child does to get away with things. You know, most of you could list what a child does, couldn't you? And those of you who are parents can certainly list what the child does, right? Well, many of you are doing that yourselves, of course. So, you know, if you can avoid it, avoid it. If you can use food, use some food. If you can use some physical activity, use the physical activity. You know, if you can be demanding to somebody, be demanding to somebody. If you can, do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many ways to avoid your true feelings. When you start truly feeling your real feelings, you stop involving everybody else in your way of avoidance. So in other words, you no longer blame other people for how you feel. You no longer feel they need to listen to you about how you feel. You no longer feel you need really any help to access how you feel. You no longer, you feel quite convinced in your own heart that feeling expiation is the way forward. You don't need anybody to cheer you up or cheer you on or tell you how good you are now that you've felt. You know, you don't need Jesus or a daddy come along and say, oh, you're wonderful because you did the right thing there. You don't need that anymore. You know, you give up all the things the child would do to avoid their feelings, and instead you embrace your feelings. And initially, you know, by embracing your feelings, the majority of those feelings are going to be bad. In other words, they're going to be sad and afraid and worried and so forth. And going through them is you're going to feel relieved afterwards, and you have faith in that. Once you have faith in that, now progress can begin. Right? Until you have faith in that, progress is like not going to happen. You can attempt to intellectually progress even, and you will find it an immense struggle unless you enter the state where you love expiation. You've got to come to love it. Just like you've got to come to love your emotion, you know, even if it's sad, you've got to come to love having emotion. You've got to love experiencing it. Once you feel this state, you'll love experiencing emotion and you'll love expiation because it's a rewarding process. Because every time you expiate, every time something is relieved from you, the rewards are great and you can measure them quite easily. So I remember when I first started loving my feelings, and just just even seeing things differently. Like within a few weeks, I started feeling colour rather than seeing it, and things like that, where I could appreciate a view, because before then I couldn't really appreciate a view. I rarely took a photo of anything when my children were growing up, because I could never really appreciate anything. Do you understand? It's sort of like, I didn't even have any feelings about that, until I started to expiate. I started to see things differently, and you start to feel things differently. I went from being frightened to go shopping to enjoying going shopping, things like that. I went from being frightened of people to enjoying the company of people. I went from being shy to being outspoken. Right? If many of you wouldn't, know, but like 35 years ago, I was a very shy person, and very worried about how much I'd be harmed by others, right? And so that dominated a lot of my thinking. And it was only by expiation that these things changed. It wasn't through any other way. I had to expiate first, I had to grieve first, and then by grieving, these changes came about. And I've talked to you before about clarity. I never had any clarity. I couldn't understand why things happened to me, or what was happening in my life, and what was the cause of them, But once I started to expiate, I started to see very clearly what caused everything. And most of what caused everything was my feelings, And I started to see that as well, that my feelings, as they changed, started causing different things to happen, which I initially didn't believe in at all, and yet eventually developed a strong faith in. Yeah. Makes sense, right?
Thank you.
So